Welcome to the Happy Soul Podcast. My name is Melissa, and this is Sammy. We are diving deep into conversations that connect and inspire. Stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation. Stories that take us to the heart of human connection. Please note that opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect those of this podcast. Please listen with your kindness and an open mind. Each story shared is authentic and vulnerable. Let's embrace our differences with empathy, knowing every voice enriches us. Together, let's cultivate a community of respect and curiosity. Thank you for listening. Now sit back, relax, and prepare to be inspired. Welcome to the Happy Soul Podcast, everyone. Today we are in person, joined by Lauren, and we're so excited to have you here, Lauren, to chat more about your story. We just kind of scratched the surface of your story in our initial phone call, and I'm just really excited to dive into it. And I'm not even really sure where we should start.
I need to start off on Lauren's patience. That's all I need to say, because we just had some massive half-hour delay technical difficulties getting in here, but that's not the part of the story. But seriously impressed with your patience. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your patience.
Thanks for having me.
Before we started recording, Lauren, we were just kind of asking about where you want to start in your story. And coming from a story of experiencing domestic violence, domestic abuse, it's an intense topic and there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you want to start, maybe just share a little bit of how you and your ex met, and we can kind of jump into from there when you first noticed the abuse, where it first started, and how the relationship developed. But let's start with the meetings and the beginning of that part.
Yeah, for sure. I can start there. It was a long time ago, so bear with me. try and remember pieces. So when we had met, I was very young, early 20s, and I was actually in a very bad mental health space, suffering a lot of depression and anxiety. And so I did have a very low value of myself and low self-worth. And so when I had met her, it was kind of that mindset where I was like, I didn't want to be alone. And she was very much like, I'll be there for you. I'm going to fix you. I'm going to take care of you, and that kind of thing. And at that time, I was like, this is perfect, because I needed someone. And so it very much started off like that, when she would try and do all of these things to try and fix me ultimately. There was also a lot that I didn't really notice because I was in that mindset. And so at the time I was like, oh, I think she has my best interests at heart. One of the things was that I actually had managed to get into this type of therapy that was quite intense, and there's a long wait list for it, and I finally gotten into it, and she didn't want me going to it. And so she was like, I don't want you to go to this therapy. I can't remember the reasoning behind it, but she didn't want me to go to this therapy. And so I stopped going because I wanted to, I don't know if it's like the people pleaser part of me back then, but I wanted to develop this relationship with her. So I didn't go to this therapy anymore. There were so many things in the beginning now that I look back where I was like, oh, because I'm in such a different mindset now, where I was like, why did I do that? I was on quite a bit of medication at the time, and I actually went cold turkey off of 5 different medications because she told me I shouldn't need things to make me happy. I should only need her. And so it got to the point where she actually hid my medication from me around the house, and I would try and find my pills because I was going through withdrawals, but she didn't see it as withdrawals. I had very bad anxiety because of the withdrawals, and I actually couldn't eat. And so I went, I think, 3 months without really eating. I'd have like 5 grapes a day. I remember I could only eat grapes, and I really struggled with eating, and I had such bad anxiety, and I felt sick all the time, and I just couldn't do things. I couldn't do things anymore. But she saw it as me having an eating disorder because I couldn't eat because of the withdrawals that she had put me in because she took me off my medication. And so this was, I think, like only 3 or 4 months into our relationship that this happened. But I was in such a bad mindset anyways, and this kind of just, I believed at the time, I was like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't be on this medication. She's right. Maybe it will be better if I'm not, and I need to make myself happy, and she can help me with that. And that was my mindset at the time. Wow. But it was, I would get upset because I knew that I wasn't feeling good, and it was withdrawals from all this medication, not taking them anymore after being on them for 10 years. And so I was kind of like, okay, I need to find them. And I would search the house looking for like just one of them to take a day or whatever I could get. Yeah. But she threw them all out in the end because she found out I was doing that. So that's kind of like how it started off. And I mean, it wasn't saying that there was so many things like that happened, but it wasn't all bad. Otherwise I would have not stayed in it. There were times where she was very like loving and caring, and she would write little notes and put them in my lunches and stuff for work. She did cook for me, and she made me lunches every day. So I mean, and she was there for me too, but there was so much that wasn't okay, and so I think those things that are okay kind of end up almost manipulating you into believing, oh, this is a good relationship because she does all these things for me, that you kind of ignore the things that make you sad or actually do hurt you. And physically I was not well. And so through the withdrawals, I did go to the hospital multiple times because I kept having chest pains and I wasn't feeling well. And I said my anxiety was so bad, I've never experienced anything like that. And I would go into triage at the ER and I was like, I need help. Like, I can't eat. I physically can't eat and I feel sick and I don't feel well. Yeah. And I remember this one time, my ex did drop me off at the hospital. She didn't believe anything I was saying. She's like, I'll drop you off and then me and my friends are going to go out. And so she dropped me off at the entrance and then she went out to the club and left me there. Yeah.
No.
Because she didn't believe in it. She thought that I was just making it up and that I was doing it for attention. And she didn't believe in anxiety and mental health and that kind of thing at the time. So yeah.
Did you have a doctor at the time? Like, were you talking to your doctor about coming off the medication and stuff like that? Were you consulting with anybody?
I had a psychiatrist at the time who was monitoring my medications and everything. I had a psychologist as well for therapy, who I ultimately stopped seeing because of my relationship. And so, but no, I was not looking at coming off of my medications. Sometimes I had fleeting thoughts where I was like, oh, maybe I'll wean down and try and, do more therapy and work on myself and that kind of thing. But at the time, no, I did not have any want or thought in my brain, I'm going to come off my medication. It was more my ex's mindset of, you should not need anything to make you happy. And I'm pretty sure those are the words that she used. You should not need anything to make you happy. And that she wanted to be the person to make me happy.
Wow.
And, early 20s and being very mentally unwell, I was kind of like, okay, maybe she's right. I don't need this. And yeah.
Can you think about what your mindset was then in the way that she was treating you, like how you received the things that she was saying to you and treating you versus how you reflect on it now?
Yes. So at the time, I thought she was coming from a place of care. And as a person, I genuinely do kind of care about people right from the get-go. And I give people the benefit of the doubt and things like that. And so I think at the time I just kind of dove in deep and I had feelings for her and I was like, okay, well, I think, she maybe does have my best interest at heart, even if this doesn't sound right, like maybe it is okay. And I didn't see that at the time, but now being, like I'm not on any medication now, I'm very healthy, I'm very happy. I'm like the happiest I've ever been, and being able to reflect on how I was back then and just realizing I was very, very vulnerable. I was in such a vulnerable space, probably shouldn't have been dating at all. Should have really been working on myself. So looking back at it now, I'm like, oh, that was not okay. And it took me all of the things that had transpired through this relationship. I didn't even realize when I left. I didn't even realize until I started doing my therapy again. I saw my old therapist who I hadn't seen for many years, and we had a great rapport, so I met up with her again. And she stopped me one day and she's like, Lauren, you do realize that this was abuse? And I was like, no, like it's just, it's not great, but it was just a relationship and, not everything's great in relationships. And she's like, no, like you were a victim of abuse. And she's like, and some of the things, which I haven't mentioned yet, but she's like, that was assault. And she was going through things. And I was like, it kind of hit me. And I had this almost epiphany where I was like, oh my goodness, maybe she's right. Like I did go through that and you don't see it. You don't see it when you're in it. And even afterwards, like having to do therapy and work on myself and relive all of the things that I did go through and the little traumatic pieces that I didn't think about at the time, you kind of see it and you're like, oh, that was. Yeah. And I think our brains also sometimes push things so far back so that we don't remember certain things as well, to protect ourselves, right? So we don't remember, and then when we work through in therapy, memories start to come up and you're like, oh, I didn't remember that happened. And so that was kind of a journey for me as well, coming through it. But my mindset now compared to back then, so different, that now I can see all of the things that did happen. Yeah.
But I want to rewind back to something that you said in our original phone call when we were when you guys were chatting and I was listening. But can you describe to us why it is important for you to share your story now?
Oh, I think it's so important because now, how I feel now after leaving and working on myself, I feel so free and so happy. And every day I literally wake up and I'm like, I can do what I want to do in life, and I can go and, strive for my dreams and my goals. And I never had that before. And so I feel like I wasted so many years of my life feeling anxious and unhappy and trapped and isolated. And I just want those that are going through that to know that you can come out of that and you can be happy, even though there's so many obstacles along the way to get out of that situation. You can achieve that, like you can be happy again, and it is worth doing. And I think so that's important for people who are going through it, or people who have come out of it and are maybe like trying to find their way too. We can like touch on that as well. Things that I have done to kind of help me navigate back through life again, because I had no idea what I was doing once I left. But also to raise awareness as well about domestic violence and domestic abuse in general, and in queer relationships. But you hear a lot about heterosexual domestic violence, especially. It's always like, men against women. You never hear about the women's side of things, or women being abusive in any way. And I think that's really important to highlight, that it can happen too. And people have told me, I don't have to worry with women, and I'm like, there's still people. Yeah, so gender doesn't make a difference. So I think that's really important as well to get out there. It's just not a topic that's talked about very often. And I think it's important, one, because a lot of people do experience it. There's a lot of people, yeah.
For sure. Do you feel comfortable, like we've talked about the medication and that part of the abuse, do you feel comfortable rewinding and talking about your relationship and like the path of your relationship? So you got together and she's got you convinced that you need to get off of medication. At what point did you start feeling more shifts in like, maybe this isn't for me, or like what other, like when you look back at that, that's the first, would you call that the first kind of big red flag that was happening?
So that was probably, now that I look back, the first one, which was so early on in the relationship. But like I said, there were so many little things that she did do that made me think, oh, maybe this isn't as bad. And so I did just kind of carry on with it. And there were, like I said, things that happened that were good and stuff too. But it was only after leaving that I reflected and was like, oh, that was the first big shift. It wasn't until, oh my goodness, where I started to have thoughts where I was like, this isn't for me. Wasn't probably until like 4 years in or something, I think. Like it was quite far in. And there were times throughout the relationship where I was very unhappy and like I didn't want to be there, or like I knew I didn't deserve that. There were moments throughout, but I was also like, oh, this is my person. We've been together for so long. We also, in that time frame, we can touch on this too, took on a child as well. And so I raised the child for 5 years with her. And so having that dynamic as well was in the back of my head, like I can't just leave. And I was like, this is my life. This is how it's going to be. We've been together for so long, have a child, this is it. And so it didn't really occur to me to even have those thoughts. I was my mind was also just like, I have to deal with this. And, some parts of it are okay, so maybe it's okay, that kind of mindset. Yeah. But it's funny because I did some little things that would happen, just minor things I can't even remember because they're so small, that I would mention to like co-workers or whatever, just things that we were doing. Their reactions were always like, oh, she did that, and I remember thinking, oh, maybe that doesn't sound as great as, as it should. Yeah.
Like what kind of things, what would be an example of something that happened there?
So, okay, this is further in, but for our engagement, when she was going to propose to me, so I'm so fearful of heights. I can't even get up a ladder. Like, it scares me. I'll do things with heights, but it just terrifies me. She told me that I had to go bungee jumping with her. And she said if I don't do it, then it shows that I don't love her.
Oh my gosh.
So she had planned, she said in a month we are going bungee jumping together, and this is it. And it became this whole thing, and I was like, I'm not doing it. I kept saying, I'm not doing it. I can't physically do that. And she's like, then it shows that you don't love me. You're not committed to me, that kind of thing. And she kept saying things like that. And I would mention it to like my co-workers, and I said, I'm really anxious about it. And they were like, this person should not be making you do this. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And on the day, I was driving and she was not telling me where we were going or anything, but I had in the back of my mind, I have to like go do this bungee jumping. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm not doing it. Like, when I get there, I can't do it. I don't care. I can't do it. And I'm driving. The whole day ended up being a surprise. Like, it was a scavenger hunt with all of my family involved on like FaceTimes and stuff, that would give me the next clue for the scavenger hunt. And then she proposed to me at the end of the day. It was all a lie. So this whole month, there was no bungee jumping. I was anxious for a whole month. And she knew how scared I was of heights. Yeah. So that was kind of a bigger thing, I suppose. But I was like, if I don't do this, she's ending things with me, because she'll think I'm not committed when I am. I just don't want to do this. Yeah. And she's like, you don't trust me because you won't do it, and it's all about trust. And yeah.
Okay, I want to it's unreal.
That's unreal.
I don't know if I've actually told that before. I don't think I've said that to anyone before, because I just like glazed over it. There's so many. Yeah.
Okay, I want to dive into that a little bit more, because there's something to this, and I think it's so important to talk about. So in that moment, or in that scenario, I should say, because it's lots of moments. So she's essentially lying to you that you're not going bungee jumping. She just is stirring up a reaction out of you. Mm-hmm. Can you think about, like, what were you telling yourself as you're preparing for the bungee jumping? What are you telling yourself, I have to do this? Are you making it okay? Are you catching yourself not telling people about it? Or are you telling people and then seeing their reaction and then going, oh, should my reaction be different because I'm seeing the reaction in somebody else's face?
I told one person, I think. I told this girl, I worked at a pharmacy at the time. I told this one girl at the pharmacy, and that's when she was just like, that's not okay. And I worked at this pharmacy every day, like 5 days a week. So for a couple of months during that time. And so I would talk to her about it a little bit, and I was just like, I'm feeling really anxious. In my mind, I was like, there's no way in hell I'm doing this. Like, I can't do it. Yeah. Like, everyone who knows me, I can't even get up a ladder. Like, I really struggle with heights. Yeah. I will push myself to do little things. Like, I can do, plane flights and things like that. Bungee jumping, that's a whole other level. I will not do it. So in my head, I was like, I'm not doing this. So it was more preparation for the reaction I was going to get from her when I don't do it. So that was feeding into my anxiety. I was like, okay, I told her I wasn't going to do it. And she just kept saying, like, we're doing it. You need to be committed. And so it was more so in my mind thinking about when we get there to the bungee jumping place on the day, how she's going to react when I don't do it. And then I also had this fear, is she just going to make me do, like, is she physically going to make me put the things on and do it? So that was kind of a fear of mine. And I was like, no, I won't let it get to that point, because there's other people around. Like, it's not going to, I won't have to do it. So there's a lot of those kind of anxieties. I didn't talk to anyone really about it, because she was also very, very private about our relationship, which now I look back, I'm like, oh, now I see why. So I felt scared to talk to anyone, because I was worried she'd find out that I've said anything to anyone. But I knew she didn't talk to anyone from my work, so that's why I told that one.
That's such a common thing that I've heard from multiple people in those kinds of relationships, that the abuser is saying, you shouldn't be telling people about our relationship. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't be talking to other people about this. Yeah. Our relationship is private. Yes. And it makes you wonder, like, are they consciously aware that they're telling you not to talk about it because they don't want people to know how bad they are? Or is it just like a subconscious thing for control? Do you know what I mean? Like, I so wonder, in their brain, do they know that they're bad? and this is the conscious, like, or do they believe genuinely that nobody talks about their relationships to other people?
Well, that's just it, because now I look at it, I'm like, why do people say this? So, like, I understand certain things being private in a relationship, obviously, but I'm like, you would want your partner to be excited and happy about the relationship, that they're sharing it with their friends, and do you know what I mean? So it doesn't make sense to me either why someone would want their partner to hide every aspect. I didn't talk to anyone during the time I was with her, even with like phone calls. She would go through my phone and things as well. So I was very, and then if she saw like I had texted someone or called someone, she's like, who is this? What are you talking about? That kind of thing. So I didn't talk to anyone during that time. I kind of just kept things to myself. Yeah.
It's so heartbreaking for you, Lauren.
Yeah, it was hard, but
I can't.
Yeah. Okay, so when she's going through your phone, are you telling yourself, this is normal, this is what relationships are, or are you like, this is wrong?
Mm-hmm. No, I knew it wasn't, and there was all this anxiety that she'd find, because she would find things even if there was nothing wrong on my phone, because there never was. I was worried she'd find an email from like a random company and pull that apart and be like, why is this company contacting you? There's something hidden there, do you know what I mean? There was actually an instance where this girl at work, when I worked in BC, she told me she was bisexual, and I hadn't shared that information with my ex, and it's not like I didn't omit it, but like I wasn't consciously omitting it, I just didn't mention it because I don't think it's important to share, you know, oh, by the way, this person's bisexual, like it doesn't matter. And so when it came out, I can't remember what I was talking to her about, like my ex, it came out in conversation, and she was like, you lied to me, you have a thing for her, like you omitted that information, you literally chose not to say it, which is shady, and all of this stuff. There was nothing between me and this other person. We worked together, that was it. And there was nothing, but everything I said or did was torn apart, and she dove into it like there was all these hidden meanings, so I felt like I couldn't say anything. So I did kind of clam up about absolutely everything for years. And then that became an issue where she was like, you don't communicate with me. You are terrible at communication. And we need to work on your communication. You need to be able to talk to me. But then when I did, so I couldn't win either way, because when I did, then it was ripped apart. I was ripped apart. So that I'm going off track a little bit. So with my phone situation, with any texts between me and anyone, friends, whatever, whenever she did go on my phone and look, I had anxiety. Not because I was worried I had done anything, because I hadn't, but that she would think that there was something more to everything that I had said. But it was like that even with my family. I go to my parents' house and I couldn't speak there because no matter what I said, she would look into that as well. So I kept it very small talk. I think I saw my family. I didn't have much to do with my family the whole time. I was very isolated. So when we did move back here to Calgary and I went to my parents' house one of the first times, I think I kept it small talk. It was very much like, how are you? How are you doing? I didn't have a relationship really with them anymore. And we got in the car to drive home, and my ex just yelled at me and was like, why would you say this? Why would you say that? Why would you do this? Why would you do that? And so I had to constantly be on edge and think about what I'm saying, what I'm doing, even body language, like how I'm portraying myself. For the whole time, for all of the years that we were together.
How long were you together?
7 years.
And how far in-ish do you feel like you were when you were like, I need to get out of this?
I think it was about 4 or 5 years. We were in BC. I bought a plane ticket, actually. I did buy a plane ticket, and my parents lived in Toronto at the time. And so I bought a plane ticket to Toronto. I was like, I'm going to my parents' house. I can't do this. We were arguing all the time, and it was to do with my communication, but like I said, I couldn't talk because of, So there was all of that. And then her dad actually sat me down and talked to me, and he was like, she has a lot of abandonment issues and a lot of trauma and things like that. So this is why she is the way she is. And he was like, I love you. I want you in our lives still. Like you guys can work on this. I see you guys together. Like you are meant to be together. And then on the flip side, my dad was also like, well, maybe you can work it out. You guys have been together for a long time. Bear in mind, no one, her dad, my dad, did not know anything about what was going on. But like no one knew. I didn't talk about it with anyone. So they very much convinced me to maybe I was like, oh, maybe I should give it a little bit longer. Maybe I should try a little bit harder. Maybe, maybe there's a chance. My brother on the flip side was like, you need to leave. Like, I want to help you. I told him a little bit more and he was like, I don't like this for you. And he still says to this day, he's like, that day you told me that you had bought a plane ticket, he was like, I have never, and then I stayed, obviously. He's like, I never liked her since that day. And he's like, I did not want you in that relationship. And he's like, and I was scared of it for you every moment after that. But I think it was our parents that ultimately convinced me, oh, maybe I should give it a little bit more time. And so I did stay after that. But that was about then. But it was funny because every day I would have these, I don't even want to say fantasies, but I could picture myself, because I was in BC at the time, I could picture myself back here in Calgary, and I lived by myself, and I lived in an apartment in downtown, and I worked back at the hospital again, and I was with my family, and I had friends, and I pictured this life for me, and I was like, I want that so badly. That is what I want. Like, that is, and it's like I craved it almost. And that was every single day I would feel that. Every single day. And I was like, this is what I want. And I don't know how I convinced her to actually move us all back to Calgary. And so we did come back. And then ultimately I ended up leaving eventually.
Wow. Just like, do you feel like when you went to have that conversation with your parents that you were hoping that maybe they would ask deeper questions to learn more so you could share, or would you not have shared even if they had asked?
That's a really tough one, because I think part of me at the time, it was like mixed feelings. I also didn't, like, I wanted them to ask, but I didn't want them to ask because I was still in that situation. And so I was like, if I can't somehow leave, if I can't get up the courage to leave, or something keeps me there, then my parents now know all of this information, and now they're going to worry about me. And now do you know what I mean? So I didn't want them to be thinking about me and worrying about me every day by having that information if I did end up having to stay, or I did end up not getting that courage, because I was in a different province. I had no friends, no family over there, and I didn't know how I was going to leave. I just wanted to, and I just had the plane flight, and that was it. But so it's kind of a tough one, because I wanted them to know, but I also was like, oh. And as well, at the same time, I think my worth had continued to just kind of go down throughout the relationship, because, there was things that were said, like, you're stupid, and, that kind of stuff, like, not very nice talk to me, that diminished my self-worth. And so I questioned my judgment a lot. And I was like, oh, am I making the right decision? Should I leave? Which is why I kind of reached out to them as well and said, I want to do this. I want to book this plane ticket. And even though they had no information about the situation, I trusted their judgment more than mine, because I had zero control in my own life. And so my opinion, I was like, I don't know if I even have like the right to make an opinion on this. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does. Yeah, it does make sense for sure. Makes a lot of sense. I just wrote this question down because I think it could also be very helpful to people who are hearing your story. What kinds of red flags could, and this is not to shame your friends and family. That's not what I'm saying one little bit, because how could they know? But from an insider's perspective, is there something like you're hearing from both dads, like you should work on this relationship, and it makes you feel like you should stay a little bit longer? Is there something that they could have recognized in hindsight, like something, if somebody is in that scenario, I'm a parent and I'm watching my child in a relationship, what kind of red flags can somebody from the outside look for if they're not hearing the information firsthand? Does that make any sense?
No, that does make sense. Yeah. Very different scenarios with both parents, because her dad lived with us. We were in the basement suite on a ranch, and so he was on the top floor. My dad was in a different province. And so from my parents' perspective, the isolation, just being isolated from the family. I didn't talk to my family for years. Like, once every now and then. And my ex was like, well, they're not making any effort. But I also wasn't able to talk to them freely. And if I did talk to them on like a FaceTime or a phone call, she was right there listening. And then she would pull apart what I would say. So I didn't feel comfortable talking to them either. So that is kind of my fault on that end. But the isolation part, I think, like being isolated. So if you notice someone that's in a relationship and suddenly they like fall off the face of the earth, basically you don't hear from them anymore, or there's no depth to the conversation, a very small talk, I would definitely question kind of like how, especially if the person, my dad actually mentioned this, sorry, I'm sidetracking, after I came out of the relationship, he was like, we were worried because we didn't hear from you, as well as she was always with you. You couldn't come to our house by yourself. You couldn't like come and see us by yourself. You couldn't make a phone call without her involved. And he was very much like, it wasn't ever just you. And so that concerned him. So I think that's one thing to kind of look out for. In terms of her dad, he lived with us and he's a lovely man. But I hid a lot as well. So I was very good because I didn't want everyone around us to know as well, because I was kind of embarrassed and ashamed at the time. And so how I was feeling, like with like the arguing and things like that, we did keep it kind of, it was more private. So he wasn't aware of any of it, and we would act a certain way around people, if that makes sense.
It does.
So it's kind of hard, I think, from that perspective to be able to, I'm trying to think of like how he could have noticed. And it would have just been like really subtle things, like maybe my demeanor this time, you know, like maybe I looked angry or upset, or I think that's a difficult one for me to think about actually. But I know that from my parents living elsewhere, like being isolated, not talking to them anymore was a huge piece. And then my grandma came to stay, and my ex she's from England, she lives in England, and she came to stay for a little bit, and my ex was very much like, we want to spend time alone with her without my parents, like just her with us. And my grandma was like, well, I only have a certain amount of time, so why can't we all do things together? And my ex was very much like, we want her by herself, like we want to spend time just her. And so she did, like she made the effort to, and did hang out with us by herself. But yeah, my ex said some things that I don't think were I can't remember exactly what was said, sorry, but they weren't very nice to my grandma in front of me. And just kind of, what did she say? My grandma was like, I think I should get back to, you know, like my parents' house and to see them, because we had spent the day with her. And my ex was like, you know, you have a backbone, you can tell them no, and things like that. Like she was quite not mean, but disrespectful in that sense. And my grandma was like a very sensitive empath, cares about everyone else's feelings, and she was kind of upset. I could see it upset her, and she was like, no, I want to be, you know, I want to be there for everyone. I want to see everyone. I want to take that time. And my ex was very much like, you know, I can't remember the wording she used, but basically kind of in the sense of like, don't be a pushover, stand up for yourself. Yeah. And I was standing there, and it upset me that she would talk to my grandma like that, but I couldn't say anything because of the situation,
the consequence that you would face,
the consequences I would face. So
even that like that line right there is such a manipulative, like she was also isolating your grandmother in that moment and making it sound like I'm sure, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm sure if you called her on it, she would spin it like she was doing something loving toward your grandmother. Yes. Like, I'm just trying to stand up for her. I'm just trying to, 100%. But stand up for her for what? Yeah. Wanting to see her family? Like she is both villainizing your parents and manipulating you and your grandmother in the same breath. Like, and in a way that you can't call her out on it, because if you do, she can just make it sound like she's trying to do something loving.
Yes, that's what she would do. Yeah, so I was always the villain in it. And so, and the reason I bring that up is just because my grandma mentioned it afterwards as well. And she was a little bit upset by it. And she said, that's when I knew something wasn't right within your relationship. And she's like, that's when I started worrying about you. She's like, when I came to visit and I saw those dynamics. So that's why I bring that up, because people could see, like my grandma was at our house, and so, you know, you can only hide so much. So yeah, I think, but sorry, to your question, I think the isolation piece and someone not acting as they usually would around you, like changing who they are with the person. Yeah.
That is really helpful.
Yeah. I think there's so much that you're saying, and this is something I want to touch on because I know that a lot of this for you isn't just about sharing it yourself, but about helping other people going through the same thing. Is you said this earlier, and I want to point this out because you said they were saying not very nice things. I mean, you know what they're saying. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
I just assume everyone knows. Like, not nice.
I don't know what those hurtful things are saying. So I'm asking this question. Can you share some of the hurtful things that were said, the not very nice things that were said? And the reason I want you to share that is because I think that some people will, if they're in that situation, could think, well, that doesn't define as a hurtful thing. That's not defining a mean thing to say. Yeah. But really it is. Mm-hmm. Are you open to sharing?
Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes it wasn't even just particular words that were said. It was things like that would make me feel low in self-worth. So a lot of the time, actually, she would focus on my intellect. And so it was a lot of like, you're not smart, or because we would think differently. And so because I didn't think the same as her, she just thought I was not smart. And she did say the word stupid a few times, but everything that she did say was based, I think, mostly on my intellect. That was further into the relationship. Sorry, things are coming up now. I'm just thinking, I'm like, oh, that happened as well. In the beginning, sorry, I'm going to backtrack. Is that okay? Yes. In the beginning, it was my body as well. So I lost all of that weight because I couldn't eat due to the withdrawals. And so then I was bony. I was quite bony. And so she was like, you are ugly, I won't touch you. And she would told me I would not touch you. I don't want to be intimate with you or touch you because you are too bony and skinny and it's ugly. And yeah. And so that's why it just came up for me. I was like, oh, what else did she say? So there was that in the beginning. But she always just made me feel like I wasn't smart enough and that there was something wrong with me because of the communication piece as well, because I didn't communicate with her. And it actually took me so many years where I was like, why am I not smart enough? Why can't I communicate? And just, if I communicated, then it would be fine and the relationship would be great. And every day I battled with that. And it wasn't until I came out of it where I was like, no, Lauren, you're great at communicating. Like, I am really good at communicating with people. I just didn't feel safe to do so. And so that's the difference, right? You really question your own worth in it and whether you are like smart, whether you can do these things, and it's just because you don't feel safe to do it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the main things she said, I don't want to like say anything wrong. That's why I'm really careful because I want to make sure I'm accurate in everything I do say. It was just focusing on my intellect and on like my smarts basically the whole time, I think. I mean, there were words said where she has called me, I won't repeat like because it's bad, but some swear words and things like that she would yell at me when she was angry, which I think in any situation, friendship, relationship, if someone's swearing at you, like that's not really okay. Mm-hmm. But I think if you are having a conversation with someone and they are making you feel like your self-worth is like you are not good enough, or making you feel sad or question yourself, then I don't think that's okay. Like, I don't think that's healthy. Yeah.
What's an indicator that it's not a nice thing to say, right? And that's what the indicator is, because somebody can say a lot of different things, mm-hmm. but it's how that thing is making you feel.
That's just it, and how you feel, how whatever they've said is making you feel. If you start questioning your self-worth, if you feel low in yourself, then I think that is not a nice thing to have been said. Yeah.
Because what might feel mean to me might not feel mean to you, and what might feel right, like you might feel things differently. But if somebody loves you, it's not about pushing what they think is hurtful or not hurtful onto you. It's about them reading your heart, and you feel hurt by this, so they shouldn't say that to you, right? Like if somebody is loving you, loving somebody is also getting to know their heart and accepting their heart for what it is and not trying to change it into something that is comfortable for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, I agree as well. And I think as well, when you're especially in long-term relationships, this person knows you. You've been with them for years. They know how you feel. They know the depth of your history, your background, your past, your traumas, all of those things. So they know what would affect you as well. And so if you're in a long-term relationship and they're saying things that are hurtful for you, like making you question how you feel, I think that's like big indicators too, because they know you. So they know that this is going to bother you. You know, it's a bit harder, I guess, in shorter things when they don't know you, but still, if they're making you feel that way, then I think that's a big gap.
Did you feel like she would use those things against you? Like if she's getting to know you, was she using the things that she knew would be hurtful to you to make you feel worse?
The bungee jumping thing, right?
Yeah. I guess we could go back to the bungee jumping thing. Yeah, I think so. I would say. Actually, yes. So a lot of my history, which I won't dive into because that's a whole other thing. I did have a lot of mental health issues when I was young, and a lot of self-harming, and I was in hospital a lot when I was a teenager. And so that was brought up a lot as well, but more in so of the terms like I fixed you. And because she brought me out of it. But realistically, I wasn't doing any of that when I met her. So that's also been, it's funny because when she reached out to me recently, that was one of the pieces where it was said, you know, this is a whole other thing, I'm sorry. This girl actually reached out to me who my ex was dating or had seen or something, and this girl was like, this is what was said about you, that your ex had brought you out of self-harm and all of this stuff. And I was like, no, I actually didn't self-harm when I was with her. So this is just her bringing up my history now to this day. She's talking about it, but
trying to make herself sound awesome.
Yeah. So I think sometimes that happened in the relationship too, where it was kind of like, I fixed you, I did this for you, I brought you out of those mental health issues. But then now, obviously, when I look back at it, I'm like, you gave me a hell of a lot of things, and I'm actually just a really strong person to have worked through, added on trauma. And so I worked through my mental health issues, as well as you gave me 7 years of trauma. I came out of that and worked on that, and now look at me, you know? So I know I kind of feel like that sometimes. I'm like,
yeah, you should. I think like talking about the things people say and using them against you was like, if you're in a healthy relationship, especially like early on, you might not know the things that are going to upset the other person, but as you jokingly have fun and play around and have conversations, you're going to learn those things that trigger your spouse, and you learn to not say them because you care about them. It's because you see them hurt and you're like, oh, that's the thing. Okay, I won't do that one anymore. Do you know what I mean? Because we all poke fun and have jokes, but like I know that for me and my husband, there's certain things that we both know they're not jokes. We can poke fun at each other for a lot of things, but there's certain things that are just not funny. And we used to when we first started dating, and we both learned that each other's are not okay and we don't do them. But in an unhealthy one, they see those ones and they keep going with those things. Yeah. And they grab on and hold on to those things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to ask, is there a piece of your story that you haven't shared? I know I believe on our initial call, if I'm remembering correctly, there was some like pretty intense physical aggression things that came up too.
Yes. There was one instance that I did have to work through a little bit in therapy. It's hard because I actually don't share it with people. There was the one piece that I did touch on with you that was a big piece that I did have. I haven't shared it really with many people, and maybe it is important to share. It's just a little bit harder for me, that's all, because I did have to share. That's okay. I will. I did have PTSD from it, and I was hospitalized after leaving because I would have flashbacks of the situation. But I've worked on that, and I know in this podcast I may seem kind of detached. It's just I've worked through everything, and so for me I am a little bit like, this happened to me, I'm through it, so it's more of a detached, I'm not emotional about it anymore. So there was an instance where I was very, very sick. And so whenever I was sick in my relationship, she didn't believe me. She never thought I was sick. And there'd be times where I would be vomiting and she'd be like, you're making yourself sick, or you're just coughing, or she would never believe I was sick. In this instance, I had, I think, a 41 degree fever. And I was in bed and I had the chills, and I don't get sick. People who know me, I'm never sick. I actually think that's the first time maybe in 15 years I've had a fever. And I was in bed, and I'm not going to go into details, but she forced herself on me and wanted to have sex, and I didn't because I said I didn't feel well, and she didn't listen to me. And so after about, 20 minutes, half hour, she was like, she got off and she was like, you're actually really hot. Your body is really hot. And I was like, yes, I am very sick. I have a fever. And yeah, and she did. She got off me. But that scenario afterwards, I was like, I was really unwell and did not feel well, and no matter what I said or did, and I tried to push her off me, and I couldn't because I'm not as strong as she was. And so that scenario happened, and afterwards I did go to therapy about it, and I did have all the trauma from it. I talked to my therapist, and I said to her, I was like, well, you know, maybe it was my wifely duty to have done that because she wanted to, and I didn't actually do things intimately very much with her near the end because I did not want to. And so in this case, I was like, maybe I had to. And my therapist was like, Lauren, you were sexually assaulted. And I was like, no. I was like, are you sure? And she was like, yes. And that was another moment where I was like, oh, this happened to me. And so as soon as I accepted that happened to me, then I had flashbacks and PTSD, and I did go to a psychiatric unit for I think 10 days where I needed to get supports in the community and help to get through that because it put me in a really bad spiral. So that's one instance that did happen. And then after leaving her, I did go back to the house one day to grab my stuff because I had to this will be a whole other thing, but I had to get out of there pretty much. I didn't want to go back, but I had to grab a couple of things. And she didn't let me leave the one time, and she actually had my head with her hands on both the sides of my head against the wall, and she was like, just listen to me. And she would not let me leave, and I was like trying to get her off me, and she held me there because she didn't want me to leave because she wanted to say what she needed to say. And so it was physical in that sense. There was never any hitting or anything like that, but there would be grabbing, and then there's a lot that I try and like push out of my memory. That one sexual assault really stands forefront because I was really unwell and that wasn't okay. But I think there were probably other instances too that happened throughout the relationship where I didn't want to, and just, you know, but yeah, that was one of the big ones. And I don't share that, like I haven't really shared that, but I think it is important for people to know kind of how intense it can get, and how in those moments as well, you might be like, oh, maybe I should because they, you know, I'm married to them and I haven't done it for a while. You know, you have I don't know, sometimes I would have the thoughts like it's been a long time since I have done. And so, you know, she probably deserves that. Like that's my mindset in the moment. Yeah. I did try and get her off and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I'm sorry that you felt that way, that you had these wifely duties that you needed to uphold when you're ill or in general.
In general, yeah.
You know, like, because I think we can, even in a healthy relationship, I think if it's been a while, you think, well, we probably should. It's been a little while. Like, sometimes you're in the mood and sometimes you're not, and you have, like, different shifts. But a healthy relationship, the partner is going to be like, if you don't want to, even if it's been a while, we won't. You know what I mean? There's conversation about it, but in unhealthy ones, there's guilt or force or whatever, right? And that's just, it's horrible. Go ahead.
First want to say I'm really sorry that you went through that, because that is awful. And second, I want to say that I think it is important. It is an important piece of the story, because I think that it is unfortunately common for people to think that, like, I just read a thing the other day that it is only starting in the last like 10, 15 years that courts recognize interrelationship rape. Mm-hmm. It's like that term is new, which is horrifying, but it also explains why we don't think that it exists, and it really does. And I think it's important for people to hear. I have spoken to other people who have experienced it, and I think it's a really important piece that people, like, we need to teach our children. We need to, not as babies, but right, like when our children start going into relationships, when people start going into relationships, people need to understand that no means no with the person you meet at the bar. No means no with the person that you're in a relationship. No means no when the person you're married to them, you have children with them. No means no, period. It means like there's no comma. No matter the state of your relationship, there's never a comma at the end of that. And I think that's so important. And third, Sammy is like the kind of person who she stands up for people. And I feel like you're ready to kick some ass. I'm like looking over at you and you look like you're ready to kick some ass.
I just can't handle how somebody, like I say this to my husband all the time, just about general. And I'm like, I just don't understand how people can have hate and anger and desire to hurt people or animals or things. And when people do those kinds of things, I'm just like, how can you? Do you know what I mean? Not you, obviously. But how can someone feel good about that? How does someone get off of forcing someone into something physically and go, yeah. You know, like
Yeah,
how?
I don't know. And I thought about this afterwards as well, because all of these things that she did do, and I didn't bring up that particular piece, I don't think, to her because it would not be comfortable. But I have had the conversation, I think throughout our divorce, where I did bring up, you know, like, you did this and this, and she did not see it and was like, no, I loved and cared about you the whole time. It was just not even registered in her brain, all of these things, and she wouldn't see it, doesn't see it. And so I think when you're that type of person, you just don't. You think it's okay. Yeah. You genuinely think it's okay. Yeah.
And we've talked about this, about people like in that we know that it's like that conversation is like, this happened. And the person's like, exactly what you said. No, it didn't. That's not how it happened. Yeah. Like, it's a different reality. And you got to know, you got to wonder, like, again, do they consciously think that happened, but I can't admit it? Or it's just completely erased from their brain. And it's like, no, that definitely didn't happen. Yeah. Do you know? Like,
well, that's what I wonder with it, because I'm like, you were there, like you must know. But I think honestly, in this case with my ex, I think she thinks it's okay. I think she does, and I'm not defending her in any sense of the word, but I lived with her family and other people as well in her life from her childhood, and I've seen how they interact, and so some of it may have come from that too. And maybe she does think it generally is okay. Not that I'm defending, but there also is that, you know, self-work that you should do as an adult, and it's not okay to treat people like that. And you know that as a person anyways, you know that it's not okay.
Kind of like you only know what you're taught unless you go learn it somewhere else, kind of thing, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. But not that I don't want to defend in any way, because there's so much she does not deserve defending, but yeah, I think she genuinely doesn't see it as bad, like that, treating people that way. Yeah.
Is there a piece of your story that you haven't shared that you really feel is important that you'd like to chat about today?
I don't think so in terms of my story. I mean, obviously it was like my relationship with her was very long, so there's so many things that happened in there, but it's so in depth, and so we only touched on a few pieces, which I think were important pieces though. And I think maybe we could do something another time about coming out of it and how I am now, and like how people can get out.
Stay tuned for part 2 of Lauren's story.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. To help support the growth of this podcast, please feel free to leave us a review, follow us on socials, or recommend us to your friends. Your support honestly means the world to us. With love, Sammy and Melissa.